Alright, everybody. Welcome to the first video that I've actually recorded for the channel. I figured a good way to start the channel off would be to do a Code War kata, because that's actually a way that I like to try to start my days. Sometimes just to sit down and do a Code War kata. To me, it's kind of like solving a crossword puzzle or something of that nature, like early in the morning to kind of get your brain woke. So it's kind of like a warm up exercise, but it can be pretty complex at times. So today I'm gonna start with an easy one, called the Feast of Many Beast. So essentially what we're doing here is creating a function to solve the problem here in the instructions. As you can see, there's going to be a different amount of animals coming to a feast. They're only allowed to bring one dish, and it has to start and end with the same letters the animal's name. So we're going to create a function here called feast. They have a little bit of starter code here. Um, we're going to assume that the variables inside of the function, beast and dish, are always going to be lowercase strings, so we don't have to worry about using two lowercase or something like that to make sure that maybe the animal's name is in capital letters and the dish is in lowercase letters. So we don't have to worry about that. It's always going to be assumed that it's all lowercase, and that each variable is going to have at least two letters. They can contain hyphens and spaces, but they will not appear at the beginning and end of the string, so we don't have to worry about them being the last thing, because it just wouldn't make sense. Like, I don't know many animals or dishes that um end with a hyphen. so yeah, so I'm gonna solve this counter, but at the same time I'm gonna walk you through how I thought it should be solved, kind of so my mindset going through this, and then also likely do some refactoring, which I'll try to do in all these kind of videos, but some of them will be pretty difficult, so I may not have a way to refactor in my mind easily. So I'm gonna start with a solution that's pretty beginner friendly. If you're not too familiar with too much ES6 syntax or um, things of that nature. So we have the function, like I stated earlier, it's called feast. It has two parameters, beast and dish. And we know that we want to check the first letter of both the beast and the dish, and the last letter of the beast and the dish, or character rather, and make sure that they match. If it does, we're gonna just kind of return true and say, "Hey, you're good to go. You can bring this." And if not, we're gonna say false. You can kind of see test right here. You see, Great Blue Heron is bringing the garlic naan. Starts with a G, so there's garlic naan. Ends with an N, so there's garlic naan, so it's true. If you look at brown bear and bear claw, brown and bear both start with B, but bear ends with R and claw ends with a W, so it's going to return false. So I can actually do some pseudocoding here. I strongly encourage that when coding to kind of like write down your thoughts and how you think you should go through that. I kind of verbally did that, but now I'm going to write it down. Um, both, how about look at first letter in the beast, see if it equals first letter in dish, and then we're going to do the same thing here, but we're going to look at the last letter. All right, so we know we have to do that. Um, we so we want to return true if everything checks out, otherwise false. So from writing this, if you know anything about conditional statements, if and statements, if else statements, I'm sorry, then you pretty much see we kind of have this lined up to be perfect for a conditional statement. Um, if both things are correct, then return true. Else return false. So that's one simple if else statement. Am I thinking? So we can just actually get that started, right? So if um boom. So we know we have an if else statement that we need to write. So now we just kind of have to fill in the blanks and figure out how we're going to um check these letters. So for me, there's a JavaScript method called char at that you can use to kind of see hey, what character is at this index, what character is at another. So that comes to mind immediately. However, knowing that the way that strings are, every letter in a string kind of has an index. I think it might just be better if I say if index 0 at beast equals index 0 at dish, then return true. So I'm gonna walk that through. So if beast index 0 triple equals here because we're using JavaScript, dish at index 0, then return true. So another thing I like to do when I'm going through these katas is I kind of like to open up my terminal window or in my console. Um, I like to go ahead and kind of work with the problem. So for example, I'll come here and I'll kind of copy what I have here so far, right? Actually, I'll just rewrite it. Function feast. It's gonna take a beast. It's gonna take a dish. Um, if beast at index 0 equals dish at 0 and index 0, we're gonna return true. And then we're just gonna say else return false. Close that. And we'll just do something like really simple here. We'll call this function here. We'll do I don't know. We'll do chickadee. We'll do one of the examples. Chickadee, and then uh, make sure we put that in actual quotes. Chocolate cake. So here's the return true, and we see that it actually does return true here. And then if you were to do, let's do chickadee again. And we'll literally just put something else. We're gonna get false. So we know that works. We know that that checking the first letter, this part so far works. So now we have to think of, okay, how do we check the last index? Well, we have to get the last index. We could probably, and what I would do is, if we look at the length of the string that we have, we should get so for example, in chickadee, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 characters inside of chickadee. The length of chickadee is going to be 9. So actually, let's create a variable. Let's call it let string equal chickadee. And when we look at string.length, we see that it returns 8. Wait, did I count this wrong? I spelled chickadee wrong in this example. But so with chickadee without a K, the length is 8. So we can see that there's 8 characters here. It returns 8, but we also know that everything is 0 indexed. So if we were to look at string index 8, it's going to say undefined. So the last character in the string variable, the E, is the 7th index since we started since the 0 index. So string.length is going to return 8, but string dot length minus 1 is going to return 7. So here we can go back to our if statement. We're going to do double and because that double ampersand represents and in JavaScript. And we're going to do beast at index beast dot length minus 1 like we did here equals dish at dish dot length minus 1. Then we know we're going to return true here. So we're pretty much done here because now we're looking and we're saying if beast index 0 equals dish index 0 and the last the last character in beast and the last character in dish, if they are both the same as well, to return true. Else, if one of those is not true, then return false. So this should solve the kata here. I'm gonna run a sample test to make sure it actually goes through, and here we go. Everything runs. We're good to go. We see that we've passed all of the tests. Um, but we could make this a little bit better. We could refactor this a little bit, and make it look a little better. So I'm gonna go ahead and comment all of this out, and we can break this down to one line of code. And I'm gonna do this using ES6 syntax using arrow functions. So this is gonna be a little bit more advanced, but not super advanced. It's not quite rocket science. But I'm gonna show you how to break this down into one line of code. And so there's many different ways you could solve this. You could also check out a couple other methods. I think the slice method should probably be able to solve this. Um, Yeah, slice is the one coming to mind right now. Like I said earlier, you could use char at. I've used that for similar katas. Um, but here we're gonna use arrow functions like I stated earlier. We're gonna use and we're gonna use a different conditional statement here that's not if else. So here we're gonna use ES6 syntax and create our arrow function. So we're gonna use const feast equals beast dish. And so what this is an arrow function, and normally you would write it like this, and then um, this, and then you will put code here, right? And so what this says is that this variable feast is going to take the parameters of beast and dish. This arrow here, that's why it has the name arrow function, is kind of a return statement. It's saying basically return, do whatever is inside of these curly braces. And it can also be used as a explicit return, which is how we're gonna make this a one-liner. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna erase this code here. We're gonna we're actually gonna just erase this. We don't need it. And we're gonna kind of take the same code that we already have and just plug it in. So we're gonna say we're gonna take everything from this if statement. We're gonna copy that, and we're gonna throw it right here. So we still have that if statement. Make some more room here. So we still have that if statement, and I'm gonna show you how to totally just erase the else statement and not use if at all. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna use a question mark here, and this is called a ternary operator. Um, and it reads a little weird, and it might take some getting used to. But I like to use this. I guess you could say it kind of sacrifices readability until you get used to it. But it's not super complex, and I think it's something that as you get further in your coding career, you just get used to, and that everybody can use this. Um, so we're using our ternary operator. We're using question mark. Then we're gonna write true colon false. So the way that this works is your code is going to be evaluated. We're going to say this variable feast always is going to take in a beast in a this in the parameter. And now we're saying we're going to say the question mark is if, right? But it's a little weird, but this is pretty much how it works to me. I'm going to say if, so question mark, if everything on this side of the question mark um, is true, return true. Else is going to be this colon here, false. So if everything over here, beast index 0 equals dish index 0, and the last index of beast and the last index of dish, if both of these are true, return true. Else, return false. And we've done this in one line of code. It doesn't have to be true, false. It could be whatever else you want to return. You know, if everything here is true, return congratulations. You can enter. You know, and if all of this is true, return this. Else, we're gonna have some other kind of string here. So yeah, let's go back to how we have it. So this should also run, and this should also evaluate to true, and yeah, all of our tests should pass. We're gonna attempt here, and Code Wars is actually a lot more tests that actually run than the 3 sample tests you see. As you can see, we passed 100 tests here. So we know this code works, and we took it from what, one to here. Let's get rid of the pseudo code here. We took that from 8 lines of code and put it in a 1 line of code, and we broke our problem down into different steps and said, all right, this is what we're looking to do. What's a good way to solve this? Using an if else statement. Okay, and now we know we need an if else statement. How are we going to evaluate it? And we said, hey, we need to look at index 0 of both variables. And then we need to look at the last index. And we said, hey, let's just take the length and chop one off. That'll give us the last index since it's 0 indexed, and just compare them, return true, return false, and then we just use fancy ES6 syntax to turn it into a one-liner. So hopefully this helps somebody out there kind of think through code word katas and think through this problem, and kind of, you know, you can go out there and do code word challenges yourself. I know they can be kind of intimidating when you first start coding. Um, like I said, I try to find algorithms to do. I'm trying to make this part of my daily routine, so these number of points would go up a lot as I just start doing more and more. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully this helps somebody. Um, I really have to get into my like real YouTuber bag here and say that if you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe, else I wouldn't be really doing my job here. I know it sounds kind of corny, but it really does kind of help me with the channel. It helps encourage me to go on, and I'll definitely be getting more content out there. If you have any comments, anything that you would like to see, if you want to see more of this, or maybe a specific kata that you found kind of difficult and want to see my take on it, you can go ahead and drop that in there. And yeah, that's it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed.